I was on vacation with my family when I was about 14. I was in the pool, which had a bar attached, and I was casually talking to this group of British people. I want to say it was all guys, but I think I remember a girl with them. I started drinking a bit with them. The legal drinking age was 18, but the people who I was drinking with gave me an extra wristband they had, because apparently they were leaving the resort that day and wanted to give it to someone. My parents didn't know about this, and neither of them knew I was drinking. They were clearly a lot older and kept putting drink after drink in my hand, and I was ecstatic because I was, well, getting drunk in a pool in Cancun and out of sight from my mother. They started to try to convince me that one of the guys in the group was 15 and that I should talk to him because he liked me. Even then, I knew he definitely wasn't 15, but he also wasn't as old as the others who seemed to be in their late 30s. In hindsight, I'm thinking mid to late 20s. I was young and just thought they were joking around with me. They kept telling me he liked me and I should go hang out with him. I laughed it off the first time, but they kept suggesting. Keep in mind, this whole time my dad was in the same pool talking to his friend, and he had his eyes on me for almost the whole time. My parents are very strict. He didn't know that what I was drinking was alcoholic, and the pool was big enough that you couldn't hear what was being said. At that point, I was totally wasted, and my first time actually getting seriously drunk. I don't even remember leaving the pool with this guy trying to tell me he was 15, but apparently my dumbass did because I remember thinking he was cute. The resort is huge, and I don't know how I don't remember walking through the whole thing and not remembering it. The next thing I remember is walking and approaching a bus stop that was a 10-minute walk from the resort. I know it was 10 minutes because my family and I often went to the bus stop to explore Cancun. He told me I had a nice body and asked me if I ever had sex. I just started laughing, and he sat on the bus bench and pulled me onto his lap. At this point, my world is spinning, so I don't protest, even though I remember wanting to go back to the pool. It was then that something beautiful happened. I threw up all over him. Remember, I'm on his lap at this point, so it was like right in his face and on his chest. And I kept throwing up, like the Exorcist level projectile vomiting. He was extremely grossed out, and I don't remember what was said, but we ended up walking back to the resort, and I never saw him again. I remember feeling so embarrassed, which is ridiculous in hindsight. I wobbled back to the pool area, covered in vomit, where my mom had called the police and her and my dad were freaking out. My mom's piercing voice sobered me up a bit because I remember these parts a lot clearer even though they're still hazy. They saw how drunk I was and demanded to know what happened, so I told them. They were furious. My mom was adamant on finding that guy or his friends who had all disappeared from the pool. I didn't really see what the big deal was back then and why she wanted to find them. To this day, I think about what would have happened if I hadn't thrown up like that and actually left with him. I was 5'2" and 14 years old, and he was at least a foot taller than me, and definitely not a minor. I remember when he was close to me with no one around, and even in my extremely drunk state, I started to get a bit nervous. My parents took me back to our hotel room, and I spent hours in the bathtub just throwing up. My mom was furious, like completely livid. I wasn't too surprised at that because she yelled at me over trivial things all the time. So was my dad, which surprised me because he's always so easygoing and honestly probably would have been a bit amused at me being drunk and throwing up. Not in a cruel way, but because I was learning a lesson about alcohol that we all eventually do. He actually straight up told me that at some point before this whole vacation. But now I know that his anger wasn't directed towards me. He was cursing about the guy. I was still throwing up in the bathtub, and they had both went into the kitchen area to talk away from me. But I could vaguely hear my dad cursing terribly while speaking to my mom in our native language, and I was actually scared. I couldn't quite focus on his voice because I was legitimately drifting in and out of consciousness at that point. But I remember getting less scared and more just sad because I felt like I had disappointed him. He never got mad like that towards me. But then again, I realized later he wasn't angry at me. And he wasn't angry at the drinking. He was angry at that scumbag. I remember wondering why they were making such a big deal out of it. It was a few years later that I understood. Later on that day, because this all happened at like 2 in the afternoon, so I was at least cognizant by dinner time. I expected my mom to blow up at me over dinner when I was sober, as she usually does. That woman's like a live fuse. But they were both kinda just quiet and staring at me and didn't leave my side. I can't imagine what they were going through, knowing about the danger I had been in hours before, staring at me like it was a miracle I was there. I was young and stupid. But I would like to give my deep thanks and gratitude to beer for consistently annoying my stomach to the point of projectile vomiting. I'm confident I would have become a missing persons case. To better paint the picture, here is a description of myself at the time of this incident, 3 years ago. 5'5", 26-year-old woman, medium-length bleach blonde hair, curvy 175 pounds, wearing black high-waisted tights and a pink crop top. 3 years ago, I was walking home late at night from my friend's house. It was dark, and at the time I lived in a rough part of a large city. I've had many sketchy situations that I have gotten myself out of, so I guess I felt sort of invincible, like nothing truly scary could happen to me. When I walk alone, I always stay very alert and aware of my surroundings for my own safety, just in case. About halfway home, and roughly 10 minutes to my apartment, I noticed a van started tailing me. I was used to this since in my city it's very common for a young woman in a rough area to get propositioned for sex. It's embarrassing how desensitized to this I was. I did my usual and crossed the road so that I would be walking beside the traffic heading in the other direction. I wasn't scared, just annoyed. The van then turned down a side street, then back onto the road I was on, and pulled up to me. At this point, I still wasn't scared. Again, this has happened so many times, and it never mattered if I was wearing something that showed more skin, or if I was wearing a winter coat zipped from just below my chin all the way down to my ankles. That area is notorious for that type of activity. I decided to be firm and told the person sternly, "I'm not interested." I noticed there were 2 men in the van. They looked almost identical and may have been twins or brothers. Both men had a very dark complexion, dark eyes and short dark hair. The van didn't move. I was super annoyed and crossed the road again to get away. At this point, I figured this would be enough for them to stop following me. They didn't. They kept circling back every time I crossed the road. I've never had to put that much effort into getting a horny pervert to leave me alone. So this is when I started feeling unsafe. They zipped by me at the speed the traffic was flowing in, and I yelled for them to fuck off. I thought it finally worked. It had been 3 minutes, and I hadn't seen the van, so I thought I was in the clear. Just in case, I pulled my phone out and was getting ready to call my sister that I lived with. Just then, the van pulled up to me very quickly, and before I could even blink, one of the men jumped out of the van, opened the back door, and approached me quickly in an aggressive manner, as if he was about to scoop me up and throw me into the vehicle. The traffic in that area is very inconsistent. It was dead, and I imagine that is what they were waiting for. Just as the man was about to place his hands on me, I tilted my phone and said, "You are being filmed in my live video chat. I gave my friends your license plate number and the police have been notified." I was so scared, but I didn't let that show. I stayed as calm as I could. The man paused like he was considering if I was bluffing or telling the truth. So I tilted the phone more as if to give the fake audience a better look at him. He then jumped into the van and they sped off. I have never been the same since that night. I'm afraid of walking alone now, even in the daytime. Stay safe out there. So I was on the way home from Arby's with a mint chocolate milkshake, when I zoned out for a second and almost didn't notice a car coming out of an alleyway. I tried just letting him through, but he insisted I go on ahead. I didn't think much of it, and just gave him a wave to say thank you, and continued on walking. He drove on ahead and parked his car near some apartments. He had on a black polo shirt, so I assumed he was just dropping something off for a job or something. I kept walking, and as I got closer, he approached me and offered me a $20 bill. I asked why, but didn't understand what he said in response. So I refused since I know what's best for me. However, that didn't deter him. By this point, he was close enough to reach me, and that's exactly what he did. He grabbed my waist and I stepped to the side. He then started pulling me towards his car. He tried covering my mouth, but I bit his hand so he couldn't silence me and made sure to scream as loud as possible. He managed to get me into his car, and just before he could close it, I stuck my foot through the door to keep it open. I make it out of the car, but he grabbed me again. I suddenly make myself go limp since adding dead weight without warning creates sudden resistance and makes it harder for them to grasp you. Due to this quick thinking, I was able to get away unharmed. I quickly booked it and got on the phone with my mom once I was at a safe distance. I made sure to stay on the phone until I got back. After that, I'd taken some time to calm down and waited for the cops to get there to get my statement. The officer ended up praising my quick thinking, telling me that I'd luckily done everything right in this situation. Please, guys, take self-defense seriously. I've only ever had a week-long course, and just that alone had managed to save my life. I didn't remember too much from my self-defense course and only used the basic techniques that I'd remembered, which was making noise, dropping my weight, and checking behind me. Any other actions I'd taken were a result of logic and quick thinking. Chances are, if I'd gotten more self-defense training, it likely wouldn't have been as close of a call as it was. Also, never accept money from strangers. While there are good Samaritans, there's also people who don't have your best interest in mind. When I was 17, I wanted to au pair. A au pair is a foreign person, usually a young woman, who lives with a family and looks after their children, or cleans the house in exchange for meals, a room, and a small payment. And the only place close to me that I could go to as a 17-year-old was England. So I found this family, a mother with 2 kids, a boy and a girl. I messaged them and talked with the mother, and she seemed very interested and very nice. We set up a date for me to go, and that was that. When I got to the airport, I was very confused because they weren't there to pick me up. I messaged the mother to ask her where they were, and if it would be long for them to get to me. She told me that she was on her way and was just stuck in traffic. I thought, okay, that's fair. She told me to go to the exit and wait. Then not long after, she told me that she was there and that she was in a blue car. I was looking around very confused, since I couldn't see any blue cars there. When I finally found it, some other woman than the one I had been talking to walked out of the car and towards me. The instant I made eye contact with the other woman, I got a long text from the woman I was supposed to work for, where it basically said that her husband had come home from the country he worked in, and that they had fought because he didn't want an au pair in the house. And for some reason she didn't want to tell me that, so she just gave me to her good friend who needed an au pair. I was very confused and by that time a bit scared. It all seemed very weird, as if someone was watching me and had been waiting for the right moment to send the text. The woman seemed very friendly, but was hurrying with taking my things and putting it in her car while talking to me. I am a bit nervous and non-confrontational by nature, so I didn't really know what to do or say, other than just follow her in what she was doing. When it was all done, she told me that we should get going, and I told her that I wasn't really comfortable with it all. She told me that she understood, but that she really needed the help, and also only had 2 children at home. We had to move fast because of the place she was parked, so we got into the car and started driving out of the airport pickup spot. The second we started moving, I told her that I was very uncomfortable with this, and really wanted to get out and stay at the airport. She seemed a bit upset by this, and told me that sure she could drop me off, but she had to get out of where we were, because she could get a ticket for letting me out there or something. I don't know if this is true, just what she told me. We drove for a few minutes, to some hangars or whatever you would call them, so I could get out and call my parents. I talked to them, sobbing the whole time. I noticed that while I was talking to them, the woman was inside her car talking to a woman, the one I had been talking to originally, I presume. I didn't understand the language, so I can't say what they were talking about. When I was done talking, I got into the car again, and I told her that I really want her to take me back to the airport, and she kept asking,
"Are you sure you don't want me to take you into town, or to the shopping center?"
I of course told her no, that I really want her to just let me out by the airport. She did, thankfully, and I went inside and talked with my parents. After this happened, I got some weird voice messages from her and 2 other people. I couldn't understand them, but still very weird. My parents also tried contacting her, and she blocked them both. If you don't know, a lot of au pairs are being treated very poorly. So for us to feel safe and secure and sure that we don't get cheated out of pay or working more than we are allowed, we have to sign a contract. Later on, I found out that the contract she had sent me was fake and not really binding. I don't know how, but it wasn't legitimate. Plus, Her addresses she had sent me were also fake, and she apparently didn't live there either. I found out later on that the city I was in was a bit of a hot spot for trafficking. I didn't know this until after this had happened. A lot of very sketchy stuff. I might not be here if I stayed in the car with that woman. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but in the moment of it, I was sure something was going on. I'm just glad that I made it home.
Don't skip this.